We now turn our attention to the topic of immense gravity and global significance, the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the recent surge in violence exacerbated by flawed elections, and the rise of insurgent groups like M23 and the Allied Democratic Forces has plunged the eastern regions of DRC into chaos, creating one of the world's most pressing humanitarian crises. We are honored to have with us Dr. Tshepo Mvulane, an independent social scientist who's going to be giving us a bit more insight on this complex historical conflict, its roots, the current situation on the ground, and potential pathways to peace. And he's joining us via StreamYard. Dr. Mvulane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Salam Media.
Thank you very much. Good morning to your listeners.
Yes, I think first and foremost, if you can start by giving us an overview of the current situation in the DRC, particularly on the ongoing conflict in the eastern regions.
Thank you very much, Sinalo. So once more, greetings to your viewers and your listeners. So just for the record, on what is happening in the east of the Democratic Republic, a minority group there called the Moloi people. So my work, the DRC, is based on research. So to give a context to the listeners, the DRC falls under the Great Lakes region. So to understand the dynamics of the DRC, you've got to understand the broader politics of the Great Lakes region. And these are countries basically including Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda. And what has happened is that there has been ongoing conflict between these countries and the DRC. And so when you're listening to technology such as the M20, the M23 are believed to be backed by Uganda. MI are believed to be backed by your Burundis and Rwanda. And then, they just said earlier, the Banyamulenge, they to be actually the Banyarwanda, which originated people coming who were based in the DRC, in the east, where it is really a hotbed for conflict. So really, what happens here is, if we talk about the elections and the conflict happening because of elections, that's us being revisionist in our discourse. The conflict in DRC dates back to pre-1994. We will all remember the genocide took place in 1994 between the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda, which is just next door to DRC. The people that are attacked are really people that are labeled as foreigners, people that are claiming Congolese citizenship, yet they are not Congolese. So it's really an ethnic conflict that is really at play here. A lot of scholars have written on this, such as prominent people like Mahmoud Mamdani, and given us really a crystal clear understanding of the history of the conflict. Now, in this case, 30th of June, we had an attack on aid workers that took place in Goma. Goma is basically in the North Kivu province of the DRC. Now, these aid workers were attacked by the M23 rebels in a very close place called Kanyabayonga, which is a strategic territory in DRC. But so that we don't confuse anybody, the long and short that aid workers are just amongst the many that are attacked by the rebels in the fight between the rebels and the Congolese army. And of course, there's a lot of concerns that are raised about the role of the NGOs, the role of humanitarian aid, and what do we do about international law when the world is this continuing. I mean, this has been 1994. It's been going
Mm,
on,
mm.
and there has not been a solution.
Mm, I think that's really really concerning. And as I'm hearing you speak, I'm hearing key actors in this conflict, and they keep popping up even when you read articles. The M23, and also the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces. These seem to be the two most prominent insurgent groups involved in this conflict. Can you tell us more about these groups and their motivations?
So, to add to that list, you can also add the Mai Mai.
The
So,
My, yes,
right,
yes.
yeah, the Mai Mai. So basically, what you're calling research groups or rebels is really different groups that come together. They've got different arms to basically wage a battle against the government. Now, government in DRC has never been a united government. Every election that you see coming out of the DRC fractures and really reflects, the power that the very leaders were and how they use these rebels to promote that they can be the ones who assume to power. So it's really, really greedy politics, typical African politics. Now, these rebel groups, to understand them, you also need to understand how international political economy works. Meaning, who funds these people? How do they get the ammunition that they have? Because if they're not in a ruling party or in government, it then tells us that there is another trade at play, and this now talks to international relations. And if we understand that DRC is being part of SADC, we mention what is the role of the AU in terms of their policy on the conflict in the DRC. Again, what is the role of the United Nations? Because they send UN peace corps who are consistently on the ground in the DRC. And if we just bring it closer to home, because we're in South Africa, we've just had Sergeant Mbulelo David Ngubane, who's 39 years old. He was an operational medical practitioner, basically killed on the 30th of June. And contravenes everything that the South African government stands for in terms of our international. We talk of here specifically Geneva Convention on Law and Armed Conflict. And we are not making noise about why are we even sending our troops to the DRC, because we are not holding the government accountable to the deaths of Sadat's soldiers that are in the DRC. And if you look at the news outlets, it's really Al Jazeera that's leading. Our local news outlets are hardly speaking about this, which is why I really recommend Salam Media for really shining a light on this conflict.
I think it's a very very important conflict. I mean, and crisis to keep an eye on. I mean, more than 7.2 million people internally displaced, and people suffering from severe food insecurity, affecting more than 23.4 million Congolese. But just touching on the economic factors, how do the DRC's rich natural resources, especially its mining operations, contribute to the conflict and the instability in the region?
So I think this is an important question at an international political economy level. But for me, the economics really clouds us and distracts us from the real bone or real source of the conflict. Really, the source here is really ethnic hatred. The tribes that are in the DRC, the many languages that are spoken in the DRC, you find that you actually separate two groups. There are those that are claimed to be traditionally Congolese, and there are those that are in Congo that have been dismissed as non-Congolese. And really, if you follow all the tribes that are there, regardless on what their trade is, whether it's mining, farming, The point is they are defined based on their ethnic identity. And this is the real cause of the conflict. So, yes, they may be having diamonds. Yes, they may be having gold. Yes, our cell phones may be coming out of really the mines out of DRC. But that really is just, if you like, it's already an after effect. The real cause is the ethnic hatred. There is serious intolerance amongst the locals in the DRC that it's shocking.
And I want to focus a bit also on organizations such as the AU and also the Central African Bloc about just how much they've been involved in this effort in trying to find peace in the DRC. Are they organizations that we can still look upon to try and find something that resembles peace in the region, or are they like just any other international body like the United Nations or the ICJ or the ICC, which time and time again have proven to be quite toothless when it comes to enforcing any kind of literal and tangible long-lasting solutions to some of the pressing issues that the people of the continent and in other parts of the world continue to endure.
Silaelo, it is very sad to echo the concerns of a lot of analysts who are working on the Great Lakes region, and in fact, analysts who have been working on African politics broadly throughout the continent. The role of international bodies, you've just mentioned the ICC, the ICA, the United Nations, and basically and breaking it down to regional politics, the African Union, and its troops that is down to DRC. So all players in this conflict, they all have legs on the ground as representatives of this conflict. What is sad, however, is that the real champions that don't get the respect and recognition are really the NGOs, the many NGOs that are on the ground, that are putting their lives on the line, for giving the basics, food, water, maybe medicine. These are the real champions that don't much light is shining on them. And you take the Red Cross, for example. I mean, the Red Cross set up a base, right on the hot base in the east of DRC. Red Cross has consistently been providing all the aid you can imagine. Basic amenities that the communities need who are displaced, and that's the key word for these people that become victims. They become displaced. They have absolutely no address. They've got no sense of owning anything. And basically, the Red Cross is able to basically say, listen, we'll give you refuge. We'll feed you while you're under our refuge. And we will protect you from further attacks. But now the question must be asked, is this the role of the Red Cross? Or is this the role of the organizations that you're asking about? And really the answer there is, these organizations you're talking about are carrying a mandate. And if you talk to any soldier who is part of the Peace Corps that is really mandated to go to the ground, they will tell you we follow instructions. We know about the politics, but unfortunately, as soldiers, there's nothing we can do. We take instructions from the top. And this is where you begin to see how the African Union, how the government of the DRC, through its presidency, how they basically are complicit throughout. It doesn't even matter which government. Now we're talking about President Felix Tshisekedi. Even his predecessor, was equally complicit, if not worse. So really, we really are at an ethical dilemma in terms of leadership, in terms of organizational intervention, and in terms of hope for the people of the DRC who are victims.
I think we're going to leave it there. Dr. Mvulane Moloi, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch as the situation continues to unfold in the DRC. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thanks, Lalo, and good morning to your listeners.
There you have it there, Dr. Tshepo Mvulane, independent social scientist, giving us insight on the ongoing internal conflict in the DRC. And I think this is one very, very important for South Africa because we have our troops there. And I think there's about 4 to 5 of SANDF soldiers that have already lost their lives in that conflict. So, yeah, I think one that we need to keep a keen eye on as one of the worst humanitarian disasters on the continent and across the globe. Continues to unfold right before our eyes. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, you'll be hearing from the CEO of African Muslims Agency, Imran Chunara, on one of my favorite segments of the show. Is hashtag Fired Up, and today's topic is going to be the truth is we waste a lot of our time. The truth is we waste a lot of our time. I think this is going to be an interesting one to listen to right after this.